And now, live from England, bringing you news and analysis that you won't find on the corporate and government mainstream media. It's the WideShut Webcast.
Good evening, Resistors. Today is March 19th. Already? This year's going pretty damn quick, I think. Of course, you are tuned in to the WideShut Webcast with me, Keelan Balderson, on resistradio.com. For all of my news coverage, be sure to check out wideshut.co.uk, and if you click on the Watch Documentaries button, you'll be able to watch documentaries made by me for free, although a donation would be very much appreciated if you support what I do, but I probably didn't set that up very well with that song at the beginning. But please donate, yes. Sorry I don't have any action packs to sell you. You know, I'm not looking to invade Africa anytime soon, and I don't run around the street naked in front of TMZ cameras, but a donation would be very much appreciated. I'm not going to spend too much on the Coney baloney today. The fraud is pretty much out there now for everyone to see. Obviously, the creator, Jason Russell, was sectioned for a day or two after a pretty much wild night out, it seems, probably on the Coney profits, running around naked, kicking cars and jerking off. So clearly a stable-minded, upstanding member of society there. Now, I'm obviously not one to judge people. Fame and money and alcohol are never usually the best mix. Even well-off, pseudo-intellectual charity workers no doubt have demons that they have to deal with, just like us peasants do, and I sincerely hope that he sorts his life out so he can be a real role model for his young son, who he likes to put on camera to emotionally guilt-trip everybody. But this is not somebody who I really want to be sending money to based on the information we covered last week. But what I do want to talk about today is something that Cookie also touched on on his show last week, and that's the story of a 19-year-old who was arrested for basically ranting about the war in Afghanistan on Facebook. Last time I checked, we're supposed to have something called free speech in this country, an inalienable right to form one's own opinion and express it without fear of repercussions from the state. Once the state starts putting cages around people's thoughts and their ability to express them, they may as well get it all over with and kill everyone. If you're not allowed to have an opinion, then you're not really human anymore. And the big irony in all of this is that a lot of the time the military establishment will play the old World War card when we were really being attacked by the enemy and say that, we're out in Afghanistan fighting for your freedoms. I'm sorry, but the last time I checked, my freedoms weren't in Afghanistan, they're in England. And people's right to free speech is perhaps the biggest freedom that needs to be protected. If you want to fight for our freedoms, come home and tell West Yorkshire Police that we don't live in Nazi Germany, or Saudi Arabia, or China. We live in England. We're supposed to be mature enough to tolerate different opinions and can accept that somebody might actually be angry that we're out murdering innocent people all over the world at the behest of a bunch of corrupt politicians and corporations. What sense does it make to be offended by somebody's Facebook status when you're not offended that men in suits you're probably never going to meet are sending young lads to die in foreign countries? Clearly not for freedom, but for whatever the lie of the day is. whatever the lie is for whatever war it is. Now, I don't personally agree with the approach this young man took, but perhaps that kind of bluntness and outrage is needed from time to time to snap people out of this hero delusion, this our lads delusion. The troops aren't heroes. They're hired goons for an elite class that none of us will ever be a part of. If you want to support our lads, support them coming home, where hopefully they'll get the time and counselling they probably need to deal with the fact that they probably know a couple of people who have been blown to pieces if their own limbs haven't been blown off in the process, all needlessly based on lies. But then again, don't hold your breath, because both Labour and Tory and Lib Dem love to give all of our money to bankers rather than the public services they promised. One of the main arguments, one of the main points that the troops raise and the family of the troops raise is that they're not funded enough, they don't have the right protection, the right equipment, they're not giving the right help when they come home, yet you still support these wars and you still send your sons over there? What kind of cognitive dissonance is that? So let's take a look at what this person actually wrote, because obviously the mainstream media has to be deceptive and fail to actually tell anyone what this person wrote. You see, they don't think you're capable of making your own decisions. They don't think you're capable of coming to your own conclusions about what somebody said. You just have to accept that this person was arrested because he was being naughty to the troops. Well, somebody actually did take it upon themselves to go to this person's Facebook page and take a screenshot, and it has been floating around a lot of the lesser mainstream media websites on the internet. And this is what he actually said, this 19-year-old Azhar Ahmed. People gassing about the deaths of soldiers? What about the innocent families who have been brutally killed? The women who have been raped? The children who have been sliced up? Your enemies were the Taliban, not innocent families. All soldiers should die and go to hell. The low-life fucking scum. Got a problem? Go cry at your soldier's grave and wish him hell, because that's where he's going. So, like I say, not exactly the most tactful approach, but then again, not being tactful isn't exactly a crime. Let's put this into context. This is a rant on Facebook. He's not at some kind of troop reunion somewhere, or shouting his mouth off at a funeral, or Charlie Veaching it in a shopping centre somewhere. He didn't force you to befriend him on Facebook. He didn't force you to read his comments. That's if anyone actually complained. Perhaps a more worrying aspect of this might be that police are just trawling Facebook and spying on what people say, which would be another infringement of our freedoms, in my opinion. You know, it's not a nice status, I'll admit that, but war isn't nice. What's making people angry about that? Is it really what he's saying about, you know, troops should die or whatever, or is it because he's bringing up some difficult truths for people to swallow? What about the innocent families who have been brutally killed? Well, I agree. What about the innocent families who have been brutally killed and the women that have been raped and so on? In 2011 alone, Western troops murdered 410 innocent civilians and injured 335 in Afghanistan. Does the fact that they're brown and live in Afghanistan make them unimportant? Is it just collateral damage? And if you think that the concept of collateral damage is okay during war, what is that collateral damage for then? Are people dying? Are these innocent people dying because we're trying to find bin Laden? Well, I thought Bin Laden was dead. They've even concocted a fake story now saying that he's dead. Or is it perhaps that we're trying to get the rest of Al-Qaeda? Is that why we're over there killing hundreds of innocent people a year? Because we want to try and find Al-Qaeda? That mythical organisation that was helped into being by the CIA, who our government has been working with in Libya and Syria. And in fact, in 2009, it was announced that there were fewer than 100 members of Al-Qaeda remaining in Afghanistan. So we can basically check that one off the list. So is the collateral damage so we can get the Taliban? The Taliban that was forced into growing opium to fight back against the Western invaders, whose crop the Western invaders now protect. The CIA, folks, just happens to have a history of drug trafficking. The Afghan president's brother just happened to be on the CIA payroll and just happened to be caught trafficking drugs before he was murdered. But I guess that's all just a conspiracy theory, isn't it? Nothing to see here. Move along. What else did Ahmed write on his status? Well, he said, what about the women who have been raped? Now, I know that EDL will probably fire back at this point and say, but what about the Muslimic rape gangs? Well, all I've got to say about that argument is Ahmed a rapist? And is rape in another country okay? No, so, that's just a straw man. Just in case anybody out there was going to fire that one out. I personally find it extremely worrying that there has been so much rape during the wars in the Middle East. Not just Afghans, but also a lot of female troops who just happen to be along with the men for whatever demented reason. A lot of them get assaulted. That seems to be the moral fibre of some of these people who are supposedly fighting for our freedoms. I guess the freedom to deny sex is not that important to them. War messes with people. Things like that happen. But we shouldn't be at war in the first place. Here's a recent article from the Daily Mail that, to prove that I'm not exactly talking out of my ass here. This stuff is going on. 2 British soldiers arrested over allegations of sex abuse with 10-year-old children while they served in Afghanistan. A source close to the investigation said, nothing has been proven. What we have to establish is whether we are looking at sexual predatory behaviour or totally ill-judged larking about. Yeah, because getting kids to touch your private parts and filming it is just ill-judged larking about. The article also notes that more than 100 Iraqi civilians who claimed they were abused by UK forces recently won a legal battle at the Court of Appeal. But essentially, if you're outraged at this kind of behaviour and you rant about it on Facebook, you could be arrested. But they're fighting for our freedoms. Sounds a bit Orwellian to me, I don't know about you. And I think the most baffling aspect to this story, that I think highlights the paranoia and the divisive mentality of not just the police, in this case it is the police, but of our society, who have been lied to about the war on terror. Muslims have been made the enemy. They've been singled out as the boogeyman under your bed, just like the communists were before them. The trouble is, that kind of mentality breeds racism. So in this case, unless it was deliberately done this way, I don't know, but in this case, they charged this young man with, quote, a racially aggravated public order offence. Now, I've read the comments. I've read them out to you guys, and I'm sure some of you have already read them and will go on to follow the link and read them yourself. I'm struggling to find at any point that he makes in his comments that are racial. He doesn't mention race. There's no racial language in it at all. And the last time I checked, the troops aren't a race of people. There are many different races of people in the army. And whether you like it or not, there are many different races of people that live in Britain, many of whom consider themselves British, and many which are legally British. They just have a different skin colour. It doesn't make any sense to claim that this was racial. I've criticised the troops a hell of a lot. Mainly I tend to focus on the corrupt system that sends them out there in the first place. But that doesn't make me racist, and that doesn't make anyone that criticises the troops racist. Or is it because Azhar Ahmed's family is probably not British? Is that what they're getting at? If that's what they're getting at, then who's actually being racist? Ahmed for getting angry about these unjust, immoral wars, like thousands of white British people, or the police for singling him out and claiming that it's racial? To me, that in itself is racist. And Press TV, the Iranian news service, who were recently thrown off digital TV in the UK, likely because they're ramping up, this potential war against Iran. You can't have Iranian news pumping out, their defence when we're wanting to bomb them. But nonetheless, Press TV actually picked up on my article and quoted me, which is in a way quite encouraging, although perhaps a little sad that I have to go outside of my own country to get any of my work covered in anything remotely mainstream. Funny how logical this free speech thing is, how illogical, that I have to be on an Iranian news channel or website, a place where our leaders call them out for the lack of free speech. But I have to be quoted outside of my own country because my free speech doesn't jive well with the politics in this country. There's never a day I'm not amazed by the irony and the hypocrisy of the system. It never makes any sense. But this is what the Press TV quoted from me. I guess it was written in Iranian and then translated back because the article's a little bit disjointed. I've not actually got the link in my notes here, but you'll find it on my Facebook page or whatever. Keelan Balderson from WideShut website wondered whether the British troops are a race. And then I said, he did not use any racial terms, or is it that he himself is not British bred? In that case, who is stirring up the racial hatred? Ahmed or the police trying to pigeonhole the incident? Although we do not have a crystal ball, I'd make the bet that if his name was David Smith, he probably wouldn't have been charged. So they just took a bit of a quote from my article and popped it in there, which is quite interesting. But anyway, something else worth mentioning is the ridiculousness of arresting him under a public order offence. Public order. Since when was Facebook a public place? To commit a public order offence, firstly, you have to be in public. Inside a shop, at a restaurant, where you're shouting and causing a nuisance. Going up to some random person in the street and verbally attacking them. If you're drunk and harassing people. They use public order legislation for protests when they get out of hand, which is obviously a grey area in my opinion, but you get the point. He didn't riot. There wasn't any violent disorder. He didn't commit a fray. He didn't target anybody with threatening or abusive language. He said all soldiers should die and go to hell. There's a big difference. He didn't say, I'm going to kill Soldier Bob Smith. Everybody go and get Soldier Bob Smith. He said all soldiers should die. Again, not language I would use, but it certainly wasn't a public order offence. Even the West Yorkshire Police admitted, this is a quote, he didn't make his point very well, and that is why he has landed himself in bother. Well, if you know he didn't make his point very well, and you knew what his actual point was, because you knew he didn't make it very well, why are you arresting him? You're not interpreting the law very well, mate. What if somebody said, all bankers should die? I'm sure it's been written several times already on Facebook. People say these things because there are legit reasons to be angry about them. There's legit reasons to be angry about bankers. There's legit reasons to be angry about the military. As a concept, the military is detested by millions of people all across the world. Being angry about the illegal actions of the military shouldn't land you in jail. And again, Facebook isn't public. It's not a public place. You have the choice to look at Ahmed's Facebook page. He didn't post it on somebody else's wall. It was on his own status. How is that a public order offence? Now, on the flip side, a lot of the hate being posted on Facebook following the media's coverage of this was quite targeted. And again, I don't believe these people should be locked up, because I can use discernment. I know that it's probably a lot of hot air being made by complete morons. But unlike Ahmed, who didn't name names and didn't say he was going to personally do anything, some of these people's responses are quite specific. And these were picked up by the Sabotage Times, which is quite an interesting blog. I had a little look through that after the Google search today. And this is what a lot of people said after hearing about this story. Leanne Gillott, she said, he's disgusting and should be fucking hanged. He won't get away with it. Locked up or not, somebody will get him. He will get what he deserves. Okay. Lee Crisculo, he said, fucking sick twat. Burn his eyes out, smelly fucker. Lovely. Helen Massey wrote, cheeky smelly packy cunt. Wants tying to a tree and shooting, smelly fucker. Lock him up and throw away the key. Grr, scum. Robbie Sampler wrote on his status, he's nothing, he's gonna die very soon. And Danielle Harker, she wrote, dirty, smelly, greasy bastard needs fucking torturing the dirty packy bastard. So, this poor guy now has a target on his chest for being outraged at a bunch of hired goons for the elite who go blow up innocent people in foreign lands, and because he used some colourful language and, quote, didn't make his point very well. I wonder how many of these people will be locked up for public order offences. And another point, about this, he didn't make his point very well. Let's remember, this is Facebook. It's not about writing essays. We're not here citing sources on our Facebook statuses. It's a personal system. It's to chill out. It's to have a laugh. It's to tell people you're going shopping. It's to tell people your opinions. It's to rant. It's to share articles with like-minded people. You know, it's not university. It's not an exam. You don't have to make your point very well. And again, you only see people's status updates if you A, purposefully go looking for it, and the person hasn't set their page to private. So you've Googled their name or you've Facebooked their name, and then you've clicked on them, and then you've scrolled down to look at their status. Or you're already the person's friend on Facebook and you caught it whizzing down the side of the page while you were, monging out, looking at all the snazzy links and whatever, in the middle of hundreds of other statuses. So that brings up some interesting questions. Was it a friend that called the police on Ahmed's status? I certainly hope that they're no longer friends. But if it was, that's starting to reek of, Soviet Russia or Nazi Germany or any other repressive state where a Stasi comes along, where we have a busybody public snooping on everyone, who take the government's word for everything and then spy on other people who have the capability of independent thought. Freedom of speech is supposed to be free for everybody, not just your opinion. How can we spread freedom and democracy across the world into the Middle East if the people in this country don't even understand the basic concept of it? And if it wasn't a friend that reported him, then that leaves a few other worrying scenarios. Either people are actively looking for what they deem offensive posts to report them, which is a rather weird thing to do. Bit of a witch hunt kind of thing. Or Facebook, as a private corporation, which, as we've reported, was actually helped set up, by the CIA under a front investment firm. I've done articles on that. You'll have to Google it. Are they storing and spying on the users of Facebook? Have they got keyword algorithms to pick out certain things? I know I've had controversial articles disappear for, up to an hour until it magically pops back up again. I've always assumed that it was because they've got some kind of algorithm in play and they have to review it before they let it go onto the main wall. I remember during the riots, I can't quite remember exactly what it was, I've done a show on it, but I wrote something about the riots and it was blocked, and then when I spelt the word out riot with a space in between each letter, it wasn't blocked. So that told me they were blocking things with the word riots in. Could it be that police are using Facebook? Are they spying on people? Are they using fake profiles? And these things have been reported. I mean, it's not a case of are they? They are doing that. It's just a case of are they doing it this time? There's been reports of, quote, illegal raves that have been stopped by police who have been using fake profiles to spy on people, so they get their location and quickly get there before it happens. A lot of it happens in America, where law enforcement have admitted that they use fake profiles. Where's the moral justification for that? To me, it's almost like if a policeman pretended to be somebody's friend so they could get into a private party somewhere. Unless you're like me, who uses Facebook for promotional reasons, it's a complete invasion of privacy to do any of that. Most people use Facebook as a private hangout with people they know, or old friends, or family, or acquaintances. But it's not something, you don't let police in, do you? It's not like if you're having a garden party, you let policemen in to watch you having a garden party. Obviously, some people aren't too clued up about the privacy settings and leave it completely open for anybody to see anything. But it's not like they're welcoming them in. It's not like they're asking them to come and look. And as I said, it's not public in the sense that someone's actively, seeking out a person's profile. That's not meant to happen. It doesn't really make sense. Why would you get offended if you actively seeked out somebody's profile? If you're offended by the Ku Klux Klan, you don't actively go to a Klan rally and then get all up in arms and offended by it. You know it's coming. I mean, you'll be offended by it, but it's not like, oh my God, how dare they say this in the whatever they have, the Klan Lodge. What do you think they're going to say in the Klan Lodge? So in my opinion, any way you spin this, he's basically been set up. Either by a not so friendly friend who doesn't understand free speech, somebody who actively checked this person's wall, who they don't know, and then got offended by them. Well, if you don't know them, what are you looking at their wall for? Or a cop probably spying on them, or Facebook spying on them. In any of those scenarios, he shouldn't have been locked up, arrested, for a racially aggravated public order offence. Doesn't really make sense. Now, personally, my gut tells me that this was probably just the police or somebody using the police to use Ahmed, as an example. I don't think we're quite at the stage where the vast majority of us who post articles and make comments on Facebook are going to be arrested, just for discussing the wars, just for disagreeing, having little rants now and again, posting InfoWars articles or whatever. For now, I think the alternative media is relatively safe. The problem is, it's a stepping stone. Today it's Ahmed, tomorrow it might be me or you. Tomorrow more legislation could be enacted to shut down blogs and websites. It's a stepping stone. Society is getting progressively more fascist, and it has been for many years. We've got this new catch-all database being rolled out, where they store who you've been contacting, what websites you've been on, every phone call, every other number you've phoned, all this kind of stuff. So it's a stepping stone. But generally, I think, perhaps because, these 6 troops died recently, they were just looking for a story to divide and conquer everybody, and to remind people that you're supposed to hate the Muslims. And it's okay that we keep attacking the Middle East because this evil foreigner said the troops is bad. And judging by some of the responses that I read out, is having the desired effect. Once again, the plebs are arguing amongst themselves and forgetting that there are actually a bunch of scumbags in suits that are really making everybody's lives miserable. But I think I've pretty much touched on all the main issues with that story. I believe the guy got bail, so we'll obviously be awaiting some kind of court hearing. Let's hope it gets thrown out. If it does, the media probably won't even mention it. They'll just leave the big scary headline from the original story and never talk about it again. They do that all the time, when they arrest some random Muslims on trumped up terrorism charges. It's all over the news, terrorism. And then when they quietly get released because there's no evidence, you don't really hear about it. It's just the terrorism that everybody hears about. But anyway, we're going to be back in a minute. I'm going to take a quick break and play a song and then come back and get into some other headlines. So I'll catch you on the other side. Welcome back to the WideShut Webcast with me, Keelan Balderson. Another story that caught my eye today, actually, out of the Telegraph, is this one. Dog mess could be subjected to DNA testing under plans being considered by a council. Right. And this is where I go all libertarian on people. I just think that the state is getting ridiculously overbearing when headlines come out saying we need to have dogs DNA tested because of dog shit. And just to illustrate, my kind of view on this, I always imagine just a group of busybodies sitting around a table somewhere in some government building, and they've got a big book of laws. And after a few hours of twiddling their thumbs, yawning, checking their mobiles even though they've got nothing to check on their mobiles, probably a text from Vodafone saying they've, got 3 minutes next week or something stupid. They're looking at Facebook. They get really bored, and they just decide to add some more laws to the law book so they can do something. There has to be a point where somebody says, look guys, it's alright, you can go home now. We're fine with the laws today, thank you. We don't need any more. But of course there's somebody out there who looks at this headline and goes, oh yeah, I saw some dog poo today. It was quite a gross experience. I think, yes, we should create a massive DNA database of dogs to stop them pooing. Like, just get over it. Dogs shit sometimes. That's kind of what they do. They don't know how to use toilets. They have paws. And yeah, it can be annoying that some inconsiderate dog owners don't clean up the shit, but that's life. Some days you're just gonna stand in shit. In fact, I actually think the world would lose a little bit of charm if all the dog shit disappeared. We almost lose a coming of age ritual. Oh, you stepped in dog shit. No. It's a character building exercise for children. It's one of life's many wondrous novelties, standing in dog shit. Dog mess could be subjected to DNA testing to identify the pets and owners responsible under plans being considered by a council. Officials in Lancashire are in discussions with a forensic vet over plans to analyse dog dirt found on pavements and in parks. The scheme has been used effectively in Europe and the United States. Yeah, because we're a global government now, we have to do everything every other place does. And it's seen as an option to help tackle the growing problem of dog fouling. Ken Moss, a councillor who proposed the scheme, said talks about DNA testing are at an early stage. If it goes ahead, it would be one of the first schemes of its kind in the country. Mr. Moss, who is chairman of the council's Overview and Scrutiny Committee, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, in other words, sitting in a room scrutinising all the possible new ways they can control the public, he said, I am led to believe there are only 2 of these vets in Britain, and they work by analysing the samples and identifying the dog by DNA. Do you think, how sometimes criminals and murderers get locked up based on DNA? Do you think a dog is going to be accused of pooing because the DNA was wrong? It's insane. Now completely lost where I was reading. Well, you get the idea. They wanna take DNA of dog messes. It's gonna be somebody's job to walk around and analyse dog poo. The country's bankrupt. We're in all these immoral, illegal wars, and some people are thinking about dog shit. I mean, maybe this is good news. At least some people are still having such boring, comfortable lives that they have time to care about an animal's poo. Similar schemes in the US and Germany have relied on DNA databases with either fur or saliva samples being taken from dogs in a local area. Any dog feces found in public places are then tested and checked against the DNA databases to identify the offenders. He said, "It is possible to identify dogs from a feces sample, but you need to have a database with all the dogs in the area to identify a particular dog." He added that there were legal issues to be taken into account. If somebody has seen a dog fouling and wants to report a particular dog, you would need to take a sample, and that would require the owner's consent, said Mr. Locke. So now they want to write new legislation or whatever, and you're going to have all these, busybodies with clipboards walking up to somebody when a dog's pooed and said, "Oh, can I take a sample? You've just let your dog poo." This is ridiculous. More legislation, everybody. More legislation. It's like when you were a little kid and you were scared on the waltzers. "Are you ready for some more legislation?" And everyone's like, "No, make it stop. I don't want any more legislation." But you're just spinning around and you can't get off. The big legislation waltzers. Give me more laws. What a load of shit. And I mean, it also mirrors, those proposals that have been used, pushed out in the media quite a few times about how we need to get all dogs microchipped to stop dog fighting. Of course, the obvious point there is that people who are dog fighting probably aren't following the law anyway. They're probably not going to take their dog to a vet to get it microchipped. They probably didn't buy the dog from anywhere reputable. It's the law-abiding citizens that get affected with all the legislation. So do you think somebody who doesn't care is going to go get their dog, DNA sampled to put it in a giant database? It's not going to happen. Then what? Will we have police walking around, knocking on people's doors? "Have you got your DNA certificate, madam, for your dog?" Get the hell out of people's lives. It's that simple. We don't need dog shit DNA. And I've only got time for the hour tonight, folks, so I'm going to wrap it up with one more story. And this will be the New World Order Global Governance Quote of the Week. This is where we look at a major think tank report or a newspaper, mainstream media coverage that references the need for a new world order or global governance. Of course, nobody's trying to control the world. That's just a conspiracy theory. These think tanks, they don't do any thinking. They do a lot of supper eating. And this is an article I did last week. UN calls for more controlled global governance. The UN are set to publish another one of their meandering reports that is shrouded in intellectualisms, so the media and plebs never read it. Apparently this time globalization is getting ahead of itself and needs more tightly controlled global governance. And this is from the UN's own website, so please try not to fall asleep. The 2012 edition of Development and Globalization, Facts and Figures will employ the latest statistics to offer an in-depth analysis of the current world economic situation. Those seeking to understand better the reasons for the global slowdown will see how unrestrained and excessive financial actions led the world into the recession trap. So they ignore the fact that it's government control over markets, the fascist merger that sees politicians bought off by corporations, the bailouts that hurt the people instead of the culprits of the recession or the complete collapse, and say the government needs to be more involved. They want more involvement from the government. Yeah, that makes sense. It's a two-headed hydra. Both heads need to fuck off. If you give either head more power, the other one just goes along with it. It's feeding off each other as it grows. The publication will propose policy recommendations to overcome the crisis by fostering sustainable growth and reforming the global governance system. They quite like that word sustainable lately, don't they? It's a clever way of saying the people have to pick up the tab left behind by the government and the bankers. That's what national debt is. That's what happens in a recession. The people pick up the tab. That's sustainable growth. We slowly pay it all back and they slowly suck it all away again. It's a continual sucking from the Ponzi scheme. Sustainable just means we have to pay off their debt. The message Development and Globalization Facts and Figures 2012 sends out is clear. Global governance reform needs to catch up with globalization or risk a backlash. Globalization is at a crossroads. In order to continue safely, why do we need to continue? The process needs to be controlled and more wisely managed. For this to happen, the economic paradigm must be changed from finance-centered to a development-centered one. So they completely ignore the fact that corrupt and contrived globalization, the pillaging of the world, the economic hitman system, the expansion of the empire, they ignore the fact that it's that's causing most of the world's problems. They ignore that the economic collapse was forewarned well in advance and was built into the system. It was the derivatives that tipped it over the edge. But the poverty that everyone is going to have to face, that's just part of the economic system since day one. It's always been a Ponzi scheme. And when they get too greedy, then it buckles and we're stuck for generation and generation paying it back. They didn't write into the system that the bankers pay it off. Could it be that those who want tighter global governance over the world are perhaps those that also want the globalization? Or is that just a conspiracy theory? With a comprehensive education section explaining essential concepts of economics and statistics. Oh, so they've got a comprehensive education section to train everybody to their way of thinking. Do you think they'll be talking about central banking and the printing of money out of thin air to cause inflation? Do you think they're going to be bringing up the fractional reserve system in this pamphlet of education? Do you think they're going to be talking about the national debt that enslaves the whole world? You know, do you think they'll bring up Ron Paul in any of this talk about economic concepts? It will cover 4 main topics. Globalization and the shifting balance in the world economy, as in everything going to China and everyone else in the world becoming poor just like the Chinese people. Global imbalances, the crisis and the lack of global governance, because there's always a lack of global governance. They need more global governance because they're control freaks. Development challenges and policies to overcome the crisis, problem, reaction, solution. And long-standing challenges, like me or you, who don't agree with all this bullshit. But that pretty much wraps things up this week, folks. I'm going to leave it there. Don't have time to go for the full hour and a half, but be sure to come back at 9:30 here on resistradio.com on the radio page, as we'll have the reality check show with Bluebus. That's at 9:30. I've been Keelan Balderson. This has been the WideShut Webcast, and I'll catch you next week.
If you found the preceding information valuable, please consider buying a DVD or making a small donation of your choosing. Go to wideshut.co.uk/donate. That's wideshut.co.uk/donate. You are the resistance.